You know what? We'll take what we can get. Thank you, Rob. Welcome, everybody. If you're on Facebook, if you want to join us, I highly recommend joining us here in the PPD Zoom room. Go to pixelprodisplays.com and click on the link to. I'm going to go navigate there real quick. I'll tell you what it is on. Click on the link that says learning and go to the PPD Zoom room. Join us here in the room. This is a very special event that we're going to go through tonight. You can see here, I'm between a bunch of roses. I'm the thorn in the middle. And joining me tonight is a panel of what I will call fellow lighters that have been in the hobby or enjoying the hobby or doing many facets of the hobby for a very long time. I don't want to introduce all the details. I'm going to leave that to everybody. But what we're going to do is I have a pointed discussion that we're going to do tonight, and our goal is to help extract some of the best experiences from these people that are here with us. They've experienced in the hobby through working with themselves or working with customers or working just in general, seeing things in the field from their perspective, the different angles that over time have really been challenges for you, the end user. But my goal tonight is to facilitate the conversation and allow my friends. A lot of these folks are my friends. I'm proud to call them friends. And what we want to do tonight is we want to talk about things that have evolved over the past 10, 15 years. I've been in the hobby at least 12 or 13 with RGB. And the goal is to just kind of get the challenges that every one of these folks have faced. Not every challenge, but the ones that are going to help you, the new person, or the newer people, or the people who are kind of getting to grips with everything. Just with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce them one by one. We're going to start with Mr. Bobby Galeza. According to my panel, he's on my very right. So if I look over that way, Bobby's all the way over there. Hi, Bobby. Bobby lives in Buffalo, New York. I believe that he lives in Buffalo proper, and he's enjoyed participating in the RGB hobby. He is a home hobbyist, and he's been doing 2 home light shows. One for himself, and I'll let him take over from here. Bobby, please do an introduction of yourself so everybody knows a little bit about you and why you might happen to be here.
Okay. Yeah, I've been doing it for quite a few years. I have 2 shows, both of them, one's my mother-in-law's, the other one's my parents. I started lighting because as a family, we liked going around looking at the lights. We took my father-in-law around, and at the time he was diagnosed with ALS, and he was just so thrilled with the lights that we saw that I vowed that I was going to do this for him. And that's how I got started in the hobby. And I mean, from there, it's just blossomed and made so many friends and been to so many activities and things. It's just great.
So, what year did you start doing the RGB side of the hobby?
I believe my first show was in 2018.
So you've got a good 6 years
Yeah.
in, and you didn't start with 2 shows. You started with 1 show. Is
Yeah, I
that
started
right?
with one show, correct.
Okay. And also you are one of the organizers who puts together um, the the New York Mini. Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
And you've been doing this for how long now?
We've had 3 of them, and we have our 4th one scheduled for June 21st coming up.
So June 21st, if you're going to be in Buffalo, New York, it's a great time. I've been able to go. Thank you, Bobby. We're going to go next to my right, this is Mynor Mendoza. Mynor, please tell us about yourself. I will introduce him as he's somebody who's joined the RGB scene, and he's very good at finding catchy, new, and needful products. He is an innovator. I don't want to spoil much more of his intro, but Mynor, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and the history of doing RGB and the lighting hobby for you.
Hey, so yeah, I started with your Pixel store about 3 years ago. We hit 3 years ago in July, so starting our fourth year. And we actually came through the Halloween side. We used RGB stuff in our Halloween haunts, and there was stuff that I wanted that wasn't available. And so we started looking for how we can make that available to not only the Christmas side, but the Halloween side, and literally just grew up from there. My background is nothing to do with lights. I was a teacher by trade. I was a teacher and coach for 20 years before this. And then, so now here I am doing this full time. So I'm really grateful that the community has followed us in this journey for the last 3.5 years.
Fantastic. And so 3.5 years you've been doing your pixel store. You never did a Christmas show, but you did Halloween. That's right.
Correct. Yes. So we've been doing a Halloween show since 2014, 2015. Yeah.
So have you moved into Christmas yet?
We did. So we did our first Christmas show 2 years ago. We decided after the busy season, it was like December 12th. My wife was like, "Hey, we should probably do a show." And I was like, "Okay, let's see what we can do." And we started small. We only had about 70,000 lights for our first year, and we had 2 weeks to get it up. And fortunately, we have all the products. And so we have all the products available. So it was simple for us. And fortunately, we had a few controllers that we were able to get, and we were able to put up a show. So we did a huge tunnel, mega tree, and then we had a bunch of AC stuff. Funny enough, we were actually going to start with Lightorama and then decided that xLights was the way to go. But we kept Lightorama stuff because of all the blow up dolls, but the blow ups that my wife has that we have, and she loves the AC stuff. She likes the traditional stuff, so we have to keep that around. But definitely, it's a combination of both. And I tell people all the time, you can do both. It's a lot more work, definitely a lot more work, and a little bit more challenging with the sequencing part. But you can have both, and it looks beautiful when you get it all together.
All right. Thank you very much. Next, I'm going to turn to that would be, I think you're on my left. Jason Summers. Jason is a native of New York as well. He's from the New York, from the Buffalo area, I assume, right?
Upstate, Binghamton, New York.
Yeah. Oh,
It
that's
still
correct.
counts as
Yes.
upstate. It's not the state.
Yeah. He always ends up at and I'm grateful to see him every year when we go up to the New York Mini. But he created his own WLED controller. It was something that he developed. He learned how to develop his own board and began producing it so that it was easier for hobbyists to get involved. Is that right?
Yeah, well, one of the things my wife starts telling me is I need to practice how to say the word no.
Which is what I was talking about before we jumped on early.
And the answer is always, well, let me look into it and see what I can do. And then inevitably, chaos and other cool things ensue.
So one of the things that happened is that a new store was born. It was called RGB to go, and you sell some hardware and some items for the RGB hobby. And I want you to go ahead and tell a little bit about yourself and how you got started, what got you started, and talk about a little bit about what you do, what you bring to the hobby through what you do as a vendor.
As with any good story, it usually starts with the midlife crisis, right? My son was getting ready to go off to college, and I was the pandemic had hit, or so this is around 2020, and it wasn't a great time. So I decided I was going to take that last summer with my son before he went off to school, and we're going to do this. We're going to set up lights. We've been wanting to do it for a long time. We've been putting it off for Lord knows how long. We decided we were going to do it, and we did. And I fell in love with it. It's just one of those things where when you get those little girls dancing in the front of your driveway, you're just hooked, right? You can't imagine anything else. So been doing it ever since. Naturally, along with that comes the people asking, how do I do that? Right? And once you start showing them all your complicated spreadsheets, they get scared away and they don't ask you anymore. But as more and more people came to me, I figured what I really wanted to concentrate on was how can we get this information? Can we get people the basics so they can start their own show without being completely intimidated right out of the gate? So in doing so, I figured the first thing I wanted to do was start, we'll start into the pixel game. We'll start selling pixels. We did that at first. And then with the help of a wonderful community that we've developed along the way, I was encouraged to sort of, enter into the controller market. I'm a server architect myself. I do work with large, research computing. I do have some, background in digital design, but it's been a fun trip. So, so since then, right? So RGB to go, we started doing the controllers design. Then that's what I really started focusing on, trying to focus more towards the beginners, because it is a very complex and wonderful hobby. But when you're looking at the outside into the window, it seems pretty out of reach. So again, that's what RGB Go is really focused on now, is making it more attainable to those who are starting out.
Well, I always knew that you were focused on the beginner. I felt this. I kind of feel the same way. That it's always about facilitating and figuring out how it's done, facilitating the learning, and getting the content out there that people need. And one of the things that I didn't have a desire to do was push the hardware side of it. I just didn't. I didn't have that in me. So I give people like you a lot of credit. And same with Mynor, because he does deal with some hardware in some manners, and so does James. He deals with hardware as well, but that's a different skill set that many of us don't have. So again, very helpful and I appreciate you coming on, because it's going to be good to hear some of the experiences and some of the things that you've been challenged with, both as yourself and being a vendor. Further to my right here, or left here, that's James Hohensee from Boscoyo Studios. I've known James for, oh my goodness, for so many years. It's just incredible that I've had the privilege to know James since 2013 or 2014. James came up with the premier product that most everybody in this hobby uses, and it is called the Mega Tree Strip. And we've since come to know him as the King of Coro, and he sells these Mega Tree kicks, the Coro, and he does so many crazy things. He's a PPD affiliate, as well as Mynor and Jason was. They're both affiliates for PPD, and it's a pleasure to have you. It's an honor to have you. And James, why don't you tell everybody about your story getting into the hobby, and then tell the story about solving problems for people.
Thanks. Appreciate you guys inviting us in. It's always fun to kind of sit down and talk to the customers and do all kinds of crazy things, give little history lessons on how these things came about, because the hobby's changed so much. But like Clyde said, I started the business. We're going on almost to our 12th year now. Created the hobby. It was, I was decorating already as we made that transition into pixels back around 2010, 2011, 2012. How do you deal with the pixels? It wasn't like traditional incandescents at that point, where you can just throw them out there and it didn't really matter where they were. Now we got to have every bulb in the right spot and somehow control it, whether it was with xLights or Vixen or any of the other ones that are no longer with us, to control the lights. Started out with Renard SS controllers because I thought Lightorama controllers were too expensive, because I was a DIYer. I can build things. So I could build a 24-port Renard SS controller less than $100 versus a 16-port from LOR for, say, $250 or whatever they were back then. My first sequence show had over 600 channels of Renard SS controllers. And by the time I finished using Renard controllers, we were up to about 1,800 channels of Renards. And then as we made the transition to pixels, we typically would give those controllers away to new, locals or other people that were getting into the hobby. It gave them a way to kind of get started, tinker with it, see if it's what they wanted to do or not, and we'd help them out. And of course, as that technology changed to the pixels, new problems emerge. How do you build things? My first Mega Tree used hardware cloth. cut up into little strips, so you can imagine all those little pieces of metal. I still have scars on my arms from them, but I did a 30-foot mega tree with hardware cloth. That was the most horrible thing you could ever imagine. And out of that necessity, I have an architectural engineering background. That's what I did for 16 years prior to this business, and came up with a better solution. That's where the mega tree mounting strip, and that was really our first product that we put out there, that we sold. You know, we had been doing the Renard SS group buys for years. I can tell you a lot of the guys, the old school guys, they bought tons of these controllers from us. We helped, you know, from the chat rooms, create these kits that you would buy. You would just say how many you wanted. We could crash the forum that we were on back then, and it was kind of funny. And we started doing them off-site so we could do bigger group buys and stuff. But anyway, the Pixels came around. We used to use sand devices. That was really the best thing you could get. Of course, you could buy them as a kit, build them yourself, or you could buy them, you know, assembled already. They were all just through-hole type products, so you just populate all the boards with all the resistors and sockets and everything, programmed all your PIC chips, built your own controllers. And oh my gosh, I think the first year I switched over to them, I think we had 40 of them in our show.
Good Lord.
Which was stupid. And you got to realize in 2012, I was probably running in the neighborhood of about 50,000 pixels. And what you see, especially in some of our original props that were created in Boscoyo Studio, they got weird numbers. And a lot of the new people getting into the hobby, they don't understand where some of these numbers came from. You know, why is 170 pixels so important, or 168?
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about universes. You know, now we don't have to worry about a universe. The software has gotten so much easier to use. Things are done in the background that you never have to think about anymore. But that was a big deal back then. Sand devices were horrible just because you had to do clusters of 4 outputs and they all had to be the same. You could only do one universe per output. So things like that were important. But anyway, we've evolved as the hobby's grown, as things have gotten better, as we've found better materials. We're constantly looking for better materials. We were the first company that used 10mm Coro. We were the first company to make, you know, HDPE mesh. Of course, the Megatree mounting strips. First company to use the continuous rolls. I mean, there's so much that we've done, that we've created and brought to this industry, that has become the standard. You know, whether it's, you know, made by other competitors or even, you know, duplicated in China. And you know, it's just part of the business, unfortunately. But we're constantly, like I say, trying to find new things to do and build and truly create new ways to do things.
So but it all started out as a hobby. It all started out of just pure enjoyment, hanging the lights up and sharing it with your family, the kids, like Bobby said earlier and Mynor said earlier, just doing the stuff for the kids and seeing them smile. Jason, same experience. And now I thank you, James. And I want to go over to Scott Hanson, who is our we used to call Scott the junior. Well, actually, Rob used to called him the junior xLights developer, and it was so. Scott was so quiet, just doing anything. But over the years, and I met Scott. I want to say I met Scott in Mesquite, Texas. It was 2018 that we were down there, and that was the first time I met him. And you never met somebody who enjoyed figuring out puzzles more, or trying to make things work and make things easier. And it's been a pleasure knowing Scott for all of these years. He's so quiet, but he's so active in accomplishing tasks. And if you want to look at the track history inside xLights, because Scott develops the software in xLights, if you want to look at his track record, it really speaks for himself, that he has added so many things, including a number of the controller uploads that we find unbelievably invaluable. The sand devices, as James said earlier, you had to manually program those. thanks to the original developer, this SAN device was given a new lease on life with an upgraded firmware, and allowed you to go break out of that 4-quadrant, grouped, clustered 4 outputs. Everything had to be the same. And Scott took that a step further and made it so that you could upload from the SAN device, from using xLights, you could upload to the SAN devices, and which were just incredibly challenging. And Scott, that's not the only thing Scott added to xLights, though. I mean, Scott has spent a ton of time in that layout tab. He spent a ton of time in the sequence tab, and he's done a lot of work in the setup tab, which is the controller tab now. And I have to say, one of the biggest things that Scott ever created, and I'm really sure he was the premier person who did this, was the visualizer. Is that correct, Scott?
Keith wrote most of it, but I did work on it some.
He's being very no. Scott did a lot of work on the visualizer.
Yeah, I think it was in 2020 or 2020. The spring of it is when we rewrote basically the whole auto mode that everyone mostly uses now. And yeah, when Keith came up with that idea, well, we had been throwing it around for a while. He kind of proof of concepted on the Falcon, and then that was about it. So after that, I was kind of like, well, we can't just release it with Falcon support. So I ended up writing the FPP, the SAN device support, and kind of wrote a whole bunch of that just so we could have at least a proof of concept when I think it was 2020.6 came out. So yeah, I worked on that a little bit.
So all of you who are out there using the visualizer and the controller upload, this is probably the single most important and major improvement in xLights in all the years that we've been doing this. The upload was there already. That was 2018, I want to say. Yeah. But what changed was the visualizer, and it was the marrying of those two was incredible. So Scott, what got you started in the hobby, and how did you find yourself beginning to get into the technical side of it? What brought that on?
Yeah, so I guess I used to put Christmas lights on my parents' house when I was starting when I was 8. And so my background is I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and now I have a master's in computer science. So I guess my whole life I always tore stuff apart and tinkered with stuff. And when I was in college, I was like, Christmas lights are really just a series of lights. Can I put an SSR or something in them and turn them on and off like people were doing on the internet? So I went and bought some Renard stuff, kind of like what James was saying. I was running a 32-bit. I got a 32 output Renard controller. I had that in about 2017, I believe, and was just playing with what I could do with a Renard, hacking up my Christmas lights on my house at the time. And then I kept seeing when I was on the Renard forums, people were talking about pixels, and I was like, well, this is interesting. So I bought a SAN device, and I think 2017 is when he came out with the Beta 5, which had the newer support for stuff where you didn't have to do the clusters anymore. So I bought a SAN device, I bought some trees, got some pixels, and I bought a snowflake. And the first thing I did is I wired the snowflake, and I was using Vixen, or I was using Vixen, and I had xLights. I wired the snowflake wrong. I wired the wrong arm on it, basically. I wired one arm off. And if you know in xLights, if you do that, how do you fix it? Well, I thought you could just rotate it. In xLights, yeah, that doesn't really work well. So in xLights, I wanted a way where I could renumber it. I was like, okay, I got to redo the model. I just need to shift everything by 20 pixels. Well, there wasn't a way to do that. So I was like, and my day job, I work for an automotive company doing software for manufacturing equipment. So I'm a C++ developer by trade. So I was like, well, let me look at this code. There's got to be a way I can just add a quick feature to rotate this, because I could just renumber 100 nodes, or I could spend a long time writing something to do it for me. So that's what I kind of did. Is I downloaded the code, and I realized it uses a similar framework that I've used at work. I've got it compiling in a couple hours. So the first thing I added in 2017, it's September, is the commit date. It was a renumber feature, so I called it at the time. Now it's called the shift feature, but it basically shifts the pixels in the custom model. And that was because I couldn't push pixels into a snowflake. know the order at the time. So I did that, and then I was using a sand device, like you were saying, and there was no, and I think I saw a YouTube video where they were showing how you could push to the Falcons, and I was like, oh, I should have bought a Falcon. Well, I had a sand device, so I was like, I want to add that. So then I started working on the sand device upload code, so I could upload to my sand devices. I had one sand device my first year, and then my second year, I think I had 5 of them. And so that's why I kind of needed it my second year. And since then, I was using sand device for a little while, and now I've switched to, obviously I have my own FPP-based controller I've made. So it's similar to a Culp, but a 16-port. And at the time, there wasn't a 16-port FPP when I built it. So I kind of just went from there, started writing stuff that benefited me, and it ended in just writing a lot of stuff.
So it sounds like more like you added a lot of things in, and then it benefited down the road for all of the people that faced the same thing that you had faced.
Yeah, and I don't know, I always have this weird commitment, I guess, to the community. Like, I remember I would sit in the Zoom room and I'd feel bad, like Holiday Coro controllers didn't work. And I know that's kind of a bad word sometimes, the company, but I feel like, our users got duped into buying their hardware, so we at least should try to make it work, even though I don't think it's the best hardware. So, like, even then, I went and bought a Holiday Coro controller, then wrote the upload, and did that all on my own. No one ever paid me or anything. I bought the controller with my own money, stupidly, I guess. But it was just like this weird commitment. Like, I wanted people to be able to use the software and stuff.
But the idea would be that you really took off on your own and did a lot of things on your own to benefit not yourself, but to benefit the community. And
that's what I was really into submodels too when I first started, because I knew that was kind of, no one really knew much about submodels. I don't know, in 2018 when I was first playing with them, like, it wasn't really documented. There wasn't a lot of high density flakes. So I really worked on the submodel dialogue a lot and kind of made stuff better. And then, just talking to, like, Clyde, he would say, hey, it's kind of annoying that it does this. And I was like, yeah, it is kind of annoying. I'm sure there's a way we can make that better. And it was like simple things, like how you wanted the morph effect just to flip easier. I was like, yeah, that should be pretty easy to add.
That was my first experience talking to Scott. Absolutely has to do with the morph effect that I really remember, that I really dialed in. And this is Scott, and the comment was made in a GitHub post from Gil. Another developer for xLights, who wrote the code for the morph effect, which happens to be one of my absolute favorite effects. I love using it. I asked for a flip directions, and Scott picked it up and ran with it and came up with an idea, and then Gil posted a comment that said, who's messing around with my code? Who is this guy? Something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. And I will take a meat cleaver to his fingers, whoever it is. And that was his actual words, was meat cleaver to his fingers. And I just about died whenever I heard that. So, but Scott's done. There's countless things. It's like James. There's so many things that all of these people here have brought into the hobby because of necessity on the challenges we faced at that day. So today, what I want to do now is, now that we've kind of know everybody on the panel, I want to go back and I want to ask some very specific questions to Bobby, and I want to kind of get a good. I want you to imagine here. These questions here are just as specifically related to each of their individual talents and where they sit in the spectrum of everything that we do across the hobby. Not just, oh, I have my own home show. So with that said, Bobby has 2 layouts, 2 shows that he runs. And these are home shows. Bobby does this because it's pure enjoyment and it's fun. So with that in mind, managing 2 home light shows at 2 different locations, that sounds like it's a very massive undertaking. What are the strategies, Bobby, that you've developed over the years that really help you keep both shows running smoothly? And how do you handle any of the unexpected issues that come up during the season? Okay.
Oh, I mean, one nice thing is both shows are 10 minutes apart from each other. One's in Niagara Falls, the other one's actually in Grand Island, New York. Um, I mean, I I constantly just about every night we drive around and we check out the lights, and I have my laptop with me whenever there's any issues. Um, After I get out of work, I go to both places and check to see what's any issues from the previous night. Um, and I mean, I make sure to make use of my child labor that's available to me.
Hands up if you have child labor. I don't have child labor, so.
The joke today is that my son was off of school today because of the election. So we're celebrating freedom, and our ability to vote for our leaders. And I had my indentured servant with me, helping me along the way.
Oh, that's a heck of a way to. Boy, I wish I had some indentured servants. Yeah, right. So, so then, from the perspective of being the everyday average hobbyist and not a vendor, what has been your biggest challenge in balancing the demands of the show? Because there's some seasons that are very busy, meaning you have more to do, and other seasons that you don't have as much to do. Like it runs smoother some years, and other years it may not, maybe a little bit more bumpy. What have you done to be able to meet those technical demands and then still be able to enjoy the hobby itself? And what advice can you give the people who are listening that are thinking about expanding their shows into multiple shows? What advice can you give them?
Well, I mean, one nice thing about having multiple shows is, like they say, it costs roughly, about what, $1 a pixel to do a show. Now that includes all your tools, your, everything that goes along with that. I have that stuff all set up. Once you've got your stuff together, it's a lot easier in that way. I mean, a lot of it is just, make sure you store your stuff good. Make sure it's, as you said, get everything ready ahead of time. Get it cleaned up. Get it, make sure everything's ready to run when you start setting up. I mean, actually, probably some of the hardest parts though is when you start adding more stuff to your show though.
Really? What
I will say. Yeah.
Tell me about that. Why is that an issue? What happens? Take me through when you add something new to your show or some new things. What happens?
Well, I mean, as things go on, your show is constantly evolving. I'm constantly adding at least 1 or 2 props every year to each show. Sometimes you get something one year and you realize that was just a big bust. Now you got to get a whole new type of thing in there. I had one year where I had squirrels that decided to take up residence inside my tree topper. The same squirrels also decided to. Now I was using paracord for my guy wires, but decided to cut one of my guy wires.
Oh, well, that sounds exciting.
Yeah, that tree went splat.
Oh man.
Yeah, with the nest inside there.
So I assume that you learned that paracord might be great. However, it's not a great guy wire to run.
No, it's good for if you need to like lower it for a storm or stuff like that. But yeah.
But it's the general support. It's not good for support.
Squirrels like to eat it.
Squirrels like so that's something I didn't know. I mean, I've used some paracord not for a mega tree guy wire, but that's good to hear because I wouldn't have thought about that. I really wouldn't have because I was in the military. My goodness, paracord. You had 2 rolls of paracord in the back of every Humvee. So you wherever
the hard thing is I love paracord.
Yeah,
so I still use it all the time.
But to hear that, so if you're so one of the things personally that I experienced whenever I started the hobby, and James mentions it already, is we started the hobby with keeping our costs in mind because this is just an expensive hobby. It really is. But you can do some amazing things if you really stretch that budget out and really plan for things, right? So I was able to get for my unit paracord. I was able to get it. Like, here you go. Here's a half a roll. Take it home, Lindsay. I don't care. So I had a half a roll of paracord, which is more than I'll ever use. I would never have thought that so if somebody's out there, don't use paracord as your. That's a great lesson. But this is why I wanted to have this discussion. So in the dogfight of keeping up with two shows and the squirrels and the entourage of just general things, what other little things would you recognize? And you mentioned that adding the props. You said some props didn't work out one year. Can you tell me about that? Can you explain just a little bit better on that?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like the one where it was my my Mega Tree Topper. It was a little bit changed from what was designed. It looked pretty good, but I mean, it just wasn't as good as it should have been.
So you felt like you needed to upgrade it or do a better job
yes,
with it the next
did.
year.
I'm upgrading it this year, and we'll see how that works out. It's one of James's products, one of his spheres,
So
which has a coral column in the middle to try and keep those squirrels out.
So in general, there's as an individual home hobbyist with two shows, you've realized that you really need to have things ready ahead of time. Does that includes testing your stuff before you take it outside, or how do you prepare for that? What's the preparation step for that? Like, what do you do?
I mean, really, a lot of it is, I do check out my control boxes, check how they're doing. As to props and that kind of stuff, if from year to year, unfortunately, it is I fix those on the fly. And I mean, I use a lot of Scotch locks, clickets, those kind of. I'm not a solderer, which I'll probably get some hate on that, but
less and less of us do the soldering. James will say that he used jelly beans years ago, and I haven't used jelly beans in years, but it's because of James's suggestion. I used a lot of jelly beans. Jelly beans are they're a dolphin connector, and they have the where you could. They're in the telecom industry. They were used. But we found little things like that, and they've now changed into clickets and UY2 connectors from Scotch locks.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing just how much everything changes from year to year, and I mean, just how much you accumulate over the years.
Oh,
of
yeah,
just things.
Yeah, so that's that definitely happens as you develop your show. And just like Bobby said, one of the things that I can say personally is you do get to a point where you start saying, man, I need to update the show, and then you end up with the props that sit in your garage or sit in the attic that don't get used for a season or two or 3 or 4, and then you because you keep upgrading or updating or changing, it's always changing because you're always finding something to do with it. So Bobby, thank you. I'm going to move on to the person right next to you. That's Mynor. And Mynor, so we've heard from Bobby and his personal experiences. I'm sure that none of what he said surprised you. I saw your face shaking a number of times, yes, and nodding with him. So with that being said, there are so many people that enter this hobby every single year. What would you say are some of the most frequent challenges you hear from customers that hold them up during the season?
I think the biggest one is they try to start with a huge show. That's the biggest hurdle that I've seen. They see these beautiful shows by PPD, by Extreme, by Showstoppers, BFL light shows. They see the sequence. They're like, I want that, not knowing that that's a lot of work. That's literally just so many props, so many things that go into it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you got to start early. I mean, I get people in September, hey, I want to start a show. I'm like, great, you can get a couple of props here. Boscoyo is probably sold out for the next 5 weeks. You might get so it's Pixels in November. Hey, I want to start my show in November. It gets really, really crazy, and I'm like, okay, let's start with a small show this year. And And then even with the shows that they do, the thing that they always forget, and I guarantee somebody saying it, is the extensions. They forget extensions. They order pixels, they order the controllers, they order the Coro, and then they have to overnight extensions because they forgot the extensions. They're like, oh, that's right, my controller is going to be in my garage. All the props were all over the yard. They're the extensions, and it's a barrage of people wanting extensions. Those are the main things. Is really planning out your show. I would always recommend people to start small and grow it little by little. As Bobby said, there's challenges to just starting a show, and then you're just really trying to go all out. And hey, I really want to show exactly like I see so and so put on their sequence, and they're like, man, I'm overwhelmed. And so they're, what I always tell people is just remember that just putting on a show for everyone else, they're just grateful. You're the one that's putting all that pressure on yourself. You're the one saying, I need this, 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 and this. For the little kids dancing around, they're probably going to be dancing around to the 4 props on the ground, and that's all they care about. So, take that stress away from yourself that the show has to be perfect, because Bobby said it's a growing. You're going to keep on adding stuff. It's never going to be perfect. You're always going to be changing stuff. I didn't like this over here. I didn't like my mega tree on the left side. I'm going to put it on the right side. So it's always fluid. Your show, it's fluid. So, keep that pressure off yourself. I think that's the most important thing that people could do, is you realize that you're trying to do it for fun. Once it becomes a chore, it's no longer fun. If you're like, oh, I got to get out there and do it. I see a lot of people, James has been around longer than I have. Burnout. I see it a lot on Facebook. Like, I'm tired. I don't really want to do it anymore. And that's because you have 1,000 props, and it takes you 2 months to start just taking the stuff out of your garage. So it's like, remember that why you're doing it. The why. Just remember the why. And I think as long as you're doing that for the right reasons, and you're planning ahead, you're going to be all right. I think it's getting easier. Again, we don't have the jelly beans and any of that stuff anymore, and using rocks to cut the wires like you guys used to.
Ouch, that hurt.
Yeah, so it's become a lot easier. I'm pretty sure you guys know that it's a lot easier to put a show on now. I mean, you have testers now that can run 600 pixels. So it's become so much easier to get a show going. But then also, once you get to a certain point, it gets challenging, because then you grow out of that simplicity. And so the more the products that we're releasing become easier, the more people that we're going to start getting in. And I think, Clyde, you hit it right on the nail when you said that a lot, splicing and soldering, it's not a skill that a lot of the people coming in have. But you can't be scared of doing it, because otherwise you're just going to run into problems. We have Coro props that are 407. So, you're either going to have 43 hanging out, or you're going to cut it off and move on to the next prop. So, I guess it's a skill set that's lacking but is required. And that's the reason we have all these minis. People get to learn the skills and learn it. The VCS is amazing because you don't even have to leave your house. So I think most of the vendors are doing a really good job of providing easier access. And so a lot of the issues that we do see are just minimal issues that can be resolved. But at the end of the day, it's something that anyone can do as long as you put the time and make a plan.
So I'm sure you've heard from a huge number of the people in the community. And using the feedback that you get from them, what are some of the biggest changes you've made to your store or product offerings? And that would tell me that you probably stock a lot of extension cords. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I learned the hard way first year. I was like, oh yeah, yeah. So I just helped James out with some extension cords on a project that he was working on. Even as a vendor, my first year I was like, oh, okay, 500 extensions should be more than enough. I was sold out within the first week. I just didn't realize how many people need extensions the week before Thanksgiving. So I definitely learned that the hard way. But so you have to start carrying inventory. We just moved into a warehouse. We haven't made an announcement or anything, but we moved into a warehouse in May. So now we have.
So you're not working out of the back of your pickup truck anymore.
No more pickup trucks, no more garage. You know, my wife was like, I need to get my garage back to work out. And so we finally moved out. We have a warehouse. So we have a lot of stuff in stock now that we weren't able to stock before because it just didn't fit in the garage. So now we're able to stock up. So we were able to, you know, when you start growing, I think James, you started off in a garage, right? And so you start growing, you get to a point where you can't continue there because it's actually going to be a hindrance to your business. So we decided to, hey, we got to take the leap of faith and go all in on this. And we got the warehouse, and you know it's been doing really well for us. And now we have product in stock, so now people are like, okay, we can get it within. We buy it Monday, we can get it by Wednesday or Friday, depending where you are in the States. So it just helps with people trusting what we do as a company.
So let me ask you this. What would you say, because of that expansion and your footprint into the community as you've grown, what would you say the one or two products that really stands out? What are those products that were brought on, that you now carry, were brought on because you innovate a lot with different things? What are the products that you brought on that you found you had to bring on because they were just so requested?
So there's a lot of things, like we have like 6 different types of pixels now, and we have a couple of new ones coming out very soon as well. And so the idea is, when I looked at what was available for pixels, I wanted to make something different and change stuff. And so we were like, hey, let's try the dual datas. You know, I know that they've been around for 10 years, but our hobby hasn't been using them, so why don't we offer the dual datas? So, you know, things like that. But I think the 2 things that really stood out for us, Wired Watts has been doing a fantastic job. You know, one of the go-to vendors, and I like the build it kits. But one of the things I noticed that a lot of people are like me, I don't like building stuff. So the P5 enclosures, full builds for us, has been one of the things that really helped us separate ourselves. But there's people that do want to build their stuff, and I tell people, hey, we don't have all that stuff, go to Wired Watts. I don't have a problem, telling people to go to another vendor if I don't have the stuff. And so the full kit P5 panels have been real important for us. And I think for us, the other one would be the metal enclosures, the controller enclosures. I think that's been different. Again, the plastic boxes have their place. They're cheaper, economical, and so they're not going to go anywhere. Like I said, I don't have plastic boxes. I'm like, hey, go to Wired Watts. But for us, our metal boxes, the projector enclosures, you notice we're starting to have a lot of metal enclosures. So that's what we're pushing. That's what we're doing. As far as like what we see as a niche market for us, and be able to grow and be able to offer it without stepping on other vendors' toes. And I think that was the idea behind when we came in. And of course, we sell pixels, and I mean, pretty much almost all the vendors now sell pixels. So it's not something that that is a differentiator. So we were like, what can we make or do that's going to differentiate us from the other vendors available?
So then specifically on the P5 kits, and you make the build it kits, right?
Yes, we used to do the build it kits. We don't do it anymore.
Okay.
So people decided they just wanted a full ready to go unit.
So you switched your model to doing more ready to use stuff, as opposed to having to people are buying this stuff so they can build it on their own. And so the same thing with the controllers, because you put a lot of innovation into those controller boxes. Are you having them pre-built, or are they going out as a kit and the end user is building it?
So we have both.
Okay.
So a lot of people love building their own stuff, and they like making modifications. And you guys see them on Facebook. Some people make some crazy, amazing, beautiful builds. Far above my skill set, period. And so we offer the kits, but we also offer the full builds, because there's, again, it's a different demographic of people coming in now into the hobby. And again, I've only been around for 4 years, so you guys know, you guys have seen the transition far more than I have. But even in the 4 years that I've been around, I've seen the transition of people that are coming in want something ready to go. They want it, hey, I just wanted to plug in, turn it on for me, and that's it. So it was a simple transition for us to say, hey, why don't we just offer that opportunity for them? And if you do want to build your own kit, you do have that option to do so. And I think that's it's that options that allows people to be like, okay, maybe I'll buy one so I can see what it looks like, and then I can use that as my sample to build the rest of mine. So I've seen people do that as well.
So then, if we were to poll everybody real quick, who's joined us in the Zoom room, by show of hands, how many people buy the controllers completely done? Like you don't want to build them. How many people want them just send it to me? I don't want to do it. I'm very curious about that because for me, I love building my own controllers. It's a thing that I've always been that way. I have more videos on YouTube on how to build controllers than some of the controller builders. Of course, they're like 10 years old or 12 years old. But my take is that that's it. I think that's more of a popular thing for many of the DIY people. But I wanted to. The reason I bring this up is because one of the things, and I'm sure Jason and James are going to answer, they may talk about it too. There is more and more of a world of people adding to our hobby that are getting into the less and less of the DIY and more of the DIYF, or do it for me, DIYFM. I don't know, whatever that is. I didn't plan that one out ahead of time, but Mynor, thank you. I want to go ahead and jump over to Jason here, and I want to bring Jason in and get some of his thoughts, because Jason lives kind of in the same world that you do, but not exactly. He has a different focus, and his focus, and not that yours, it's just a different focus. You still have the garage filled with stuff, don't you, Jason?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's almost he's this close to getting a warehouse, right, Jason?
Nah, not quite. I'm a few steps away from Mynor just yet.
But the thing that I want to bring up is with your controller design, and your goal was to make this really easy for the hobbyist to enter into. What were the main challenges that you saw that the beginners had to face, and how did those controllers help them overcome that frustration?
A lot. Okay. Well, honestly, I can break it down into two things, I think. First was cost, and two is complexity. When I started, just a little background, this was during the age of the Trump stimulus checks. I was able to take those funds and build my show out of it, right? That's not happening. Well, don't know if that's happening again. But not everybody has that luxury nowadays, right? If you wanted to start a show and you don't know, you're looking to pop down several $100s just to get started. And you don't know if this is going to be for you or not. I mean, it's really just, there's so much involved that, now to get to the complexity side, we're talking a hobby that contains, electrical knowledge, carpentry knowledge, computer knowledge, networking knowledge, software knowledge, and it's just this interesting conglomeration of a lot of things, and it can be very, very overwhelming. Like Mynor was saying, you don't know what's gonna throw at you. So, and as far as making it easy to enter, I wanted to, one, bring the cost down to give people the opportunity to try out the hobby for not their entire bank account, and two, I wanted to cut the complexity down a little bit. And there's something to be said for understanding everything that's under the hood, but you really want to get started. Once you get somebody rolling, then they can start learning more and more of the nuances that comes to making a complex show. I mean, Tom Bet George is an amazing ambassador for this hobby, and he's gotten a lot of people into it, but I think he's probably, not through any fault of his own, gotten just as many people out of it when they can't reach that bar. Right? So what I wanted to do was create a controller that was inexpensive, that somebody could throw up literally within a week. Right? So it's like Mynor was saying, you're calling in October and I want to do a show for Christmas, right? Well, you're not going to do a Tom Bet George show. But yes, there's no reason you can't put stuff up on your porch, on your roof line, get things going for now. And that's why I created not only the controller, but the starter kit as well. So the starter kit was a controller, it's 200 lights, it's power supplies, all the cables you're going to need to get going. Literally, it was 15 minutes after you open the box, you got the lights blinking. And I remember the first time I did this, it wasn't 15 minutes into the whole deal, it was like days into it. I think I started putting ESP8266s together. I killed a couple ESP266s. There's a whole bunch of failure going with this as well. And if you're the type of person that you can get through that without getting frustrated, great. But you're losing a whole lot of people along the way. So I figure if you can get somebody just starting it, once they see those lights going, it's like that first drug, right? You get that first hit, now you're done. You're into it. There's nothing you can do about it. So your original question was, how do I make this easier? That was the starter kit. I wanted to have some not really a ready-to-go product, because I do think you do want to have the basic knowledge of hooking it all up together, but you gain that appreciation, and then you start to grow. All right, so that's when you start looking at Mynor's moving heads. And then you look at Falcon controllers, and you look at the huge props from Boscoyo that you really got to put up on your show. We look at ourselves as a stepping stone, right? We get you into the hobby, we get you comfortable with it, we get you wanting more, and that's the beautiful thing about this hobby is no matter what direction somebody goes into, how far they grow, we've got vendors even sitting at this table, virtual table, that can help them grow beyond that point, and that's wonderful. And I'm very content being in that little entry bubble that everybody else seems to want to get out of, because it's not pretty at times.
Well, folks, that's the end of part 1, but if you want to continue listening, there is a part 2 to our roundtable discussion where we continue talking with some of our favorite experts in the hobby, and you can join us. Just click on that other video.